Hawks. It is Mr. Calvert here again, coming to you for your next art project. You guys have been rocking it. We just finished up our Lisa Congdon flowers. I know that one was a lot to get through in one class period, cutting out all those circles and turning them into flowers, but I'm glad to see that you guys really buckled down and got that done. Good work. Today we have a new artist. His name is Joseph Amadoko. Hopefully I'm saying that right. It's kind of an odd last name, so I actually couldn't find anywhere on the internet on how to pronounce it, so I'm taking a guess here. This is going to be probably one of our longer projects, kind of like our Romero Brito project. It's going to take us about 3 or 4 weeks to get through this one, so make sure that you kind of hang in there. I know sometimes when those projects get long, they can kind of start to bog down a little bit, but remember to really persevere and stick with it throughout the project. We will get to finally use some paints too on this project, but that'll be kind of our final step of the project. So our artist that we're going to be talking about next, his name is Joseph Amadoko, and Joseph is a living artist. That means he is called a contemporary artist. He's actually the third contemporary artist that we've talked about. Notice the theme happening with Mr. Calvert's artists. Artists aren't just people who used to live a long time ago that aren't alive anymore. There are lots of artists in the world today that are still alive and making artwork. So Joseph, he is 74 years old, so a pretty old man. Here we see a picture of him. And he currently lives in Vogan, Togo. And Togo is actually a country in West Africa. So Togo is kind of this really skinny reddish orange color right here. And he lives in Vogan, which is like right along the coast, so right along the ocean there. The reason I want to bring this up is because a lot of times when we think of Africa as being one country. It's actually one continent made up of like 63 smaller countries, if I remember correctly. I think it's 63 off the top of my head. But countries like Nigeria and Chad and Libya and even Egypt is part of Africa. So Africa isn't just like one really big country. It's actually one big continent made up of lots of smaller countries, kind of like the United States is one big country made up of lots of smaller states. And Mr. Joseph, he is a painter, and typically he paints on something called flour sacks. And it's kind of like a burlap sack. We oftentimes think about them being used a long time ago to carry things, but they're still used a lot in Africa. And because he doesn't have a lot of money, oftentimes he'll use old flour sacks to paint on. And one thing that I thought was kind of cool about Joseph was that he actually was hired to design laptop covers for Dell. And Dell is a computer company. So he is actually a laptop cover that he designed, which I thought was pretty cool that they hired him to do that. Now, when we look at Joseph's work, you'll notice that you don't see any people, you don't see animals, I don't see any houses or trees or things that I even recognize. It's just lines and shapes and colors. And we would call that artwork abstract. All right, so that's artwork made of things that we don't recognize. And actually what he's trying to show with his paintings are actually West African folk tales. Now, I personally don't know any West African folk tales, so I'm not really sure how they tie into his paintings, but to Joseph, these paintings have a meaning. Okay, they're based on something. When we look at his work, a lot of times we see lots of bright colors. It's kind of cheerful to look at, kind of reminds us of not only Lisa Congdon, but also Romero Brito. They were both artists as well who use color to kind of make you feel good and happy. Very positive to look at. You'll notice that he uses a lot of black lines in his artwork, and those black lines create lots of different shapes. And those shapes that he likes to use are called geometric shapes. So those are shapes that typically we can name, like squares, triangles, rectangles. And those are all examples of geometric shapes. Now, some of these shapes you might not be able to name, but they still have a lot of really straight edges to them, which makes them geometric as well. Okay, so typically geometric either has a name or it has a lot of straight sides to it. So let's take a look at just a few different examples. They're all kind of similar styles. We see his use of bright colors, kind of those thick black lines. Sometimes he changes the thickness of his lines too. Notice like right here, this one's really thick, whereas this black line right here is much skinnier. That's something that you guys will be doing on your project today too, is kind of varying the thickness of your lines. And just by kind of changing some of them from thick to thin, it makes your artwork a little bit more interesting. And as we've talked about, nobody wants to look at boring artwork. Okay, people are typically more drawn to interesting artwork, so we want to make sure we make something that's worth looking at. A few more examples. This one seems like it's much thinner, whereas this one had some really thick sections to it, some really thick shapes. This one seems much thinner in a lot of their shapes. This one kind of has more about red and orange and pink color scheme going with it too, with a few blues and purples and greens in there too. But definitely a much warmer feeling painting than the last one. Once again, it's abstract. I don't see anything that I recognize in it as well. And I think this is our last one for today. Kind of same thing that we saw before. Different variety of thick and thin black lines, lots of different colors. This one's using a lot of blues and purples, so it's kind of more cool feeling compared to the other one, where the other one had more of those warm colors. I also want you to notice too, sometimes in the shapes he adds little details. Like here he's got these really thin black lines. That's actually called cross-hatching, and that's something that we'll learn about next class. Here he's got some little stripes with some designs in them. He's got them all over the place. Here's some kind of thick stripes. So kind of be looking for some of those things in this painting, because we're going to be adding some really itty bitty details like that to our paintings next time as well. Okay, well, I hope that you guys liked Joseph Amadoko's work. Stay tuned for the next video so you guys can kind of see what we're going to do with our project. We are going to be making a design inspired by Joseph, but we're going to incorporate our names into it. Okay, because everybody likes to use their name in the artwork. That's always pretty cool. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.